Hi, everyone. This is Ryan Kauth, and I'm the host of the Fractional Executive Podcast. This podcast is for owners of small businesses of $500,000 to $10 million in annual revenue whose growth has plateaued. Today, with us, we're really fortunate to have Nguyen. Hung is the founder of several startups and has turned around several nonprofits. He's currently working on projects that involve hemp production and homelessness transition. And I know you don't think they're related, but for some reason, Hung makes those things related. And somehow he still finds time to consult with nonprofit leaders and with multiple organizations on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we're going to talk about all those things today. And Hung is going to give us a few of his golden nuggets and secrets about how he has founded companies, turned around nonprofits, and how he's used his operational expertise, business development, marketing, and sales, how he's grown as a leader himself of several startups, and as an employer of choice with some of those, as well as financing. So Hung, thanks again for joining us today. I really appreciate it. For those of you joining us in the audience, feel free to drop comments below. We'd love to hear from you and love to interact with you if you've got ideas or you've heard of things that Hung has done and want to confirm those. Or on the other hand, if you want to say, oh, that didn't work for me, but here's what did work for me. And again, please like, subscribe, and follow the podcast. And that way we can grow the show. We can have more guests like Hung on here. And that way that will help you also grow your businesses and you can get off that terrible no growth plateau that you're currently stuck on right now. So Hung, if we can start by just kind of talking about your background. I'm always intrigued when I talk to you about how you think so differently. And, you know, I'll be sitting there listening to you talk about something you're doing, and my first reaction will be, he did that and it worked, right? And then on top of that, I mean, again, I don't know anyone who's turned around more nonprofits and grown them to be different and made them better. So let's start just with kind of your background, your story, and how you decided that, you know, starting companies and turning nonprofits around was kind of your thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ryan, for having me. And I appreciate it. But I started my first nonprofit when I was a 20-year-old kid. We work with kids who are in and out of prison systems and in and out of street gangs. And it was out of pure frustration, right? Because every time I pick up the local newspaper, there was a picture of an Asian kid who is in trouble or who's being sentenced for some kind of crimes. And the perception is that if you're an Asian kid, you are either a math genius or a criminal. And so I wanted to set out to change that. And we couldn't get any traction with any of the local nonprofits, and so we had to create it our own. And you know, being young enough, stupid enough, you know, it was free. It was liberating for us to just jump right in and do the work and gain the traction with one kid at a time. And we grew that organization from the initial 15, 16 kids to about 200 kids. And that was more than what we have done. It was about the needs that existed in the community, and that we just happened to tap into that need. And so the program grew, and it grew super fast. it grew beyond our capacity, and so we had to merge with another organization to take care of the kids. And honestly, I went into a burnout phase where those 3 o'clock in the morning calls uh, didn't help the situation, and so I had to pivot. And so I went from that organization to running Habitat for Humanity, and I was the first and the youngest executive director of the local Habitat for Humanity. And the first thing I did was to shock the system. And we built a house uh, in 7 days with just women. Um, and the women in our community step up and demonstrate that they more than capable of doing it. And I think it was more than just the fundraising, the board of director development, but tap into that local can do attitude and change the way we think about running an organization, right? So we all wants to have bigger budget, we all wants to have capable employees, but we don't often think about how what we do, how we behave, represent the aspiration, the culture of an organization. And so I wanted to make sure that we get out of the get out of the rut, get out of what we do traditionally, and find a new way of doing things to demonstrate our capacity to move the organization forward, to shake loose some of those inertia, and have an understanding of what is the new reality in our community and what is the new reality that we have to deal with to solve some of the problems. And so for me, fundamentally, it's about asking the questions and have the curiosity to jump in and trying to answer that questions. And so that I do that with every single project, every single nonprofit or business that we engage in. And I think I think that's helped us to grow as a person. It helps the organization grow, and I think it's how we shift, right? Shift our values. It's how we interact, and how we try new things, and looking forward to the next iteration. I think that's fundamentally that's what I am about. Is the excitement of looking for the next iteration.
And I think for you, Hung, that totally makes sense. That's what drives you
Yeah,
because of the many things you've done in the quick amount of time that you've done them. And again, you're one of these guys I know who, in my opinion, does the impossible, and it doesn't really even phase you. You're just kind of on to your next, impossible project. So going back to when you were that 20-year-old and you hit that wall, right? What were some of the things that you had to kind of step back and reassess to get you moving forward, getting out of that kind of burnout phase?
yeah. I think more than anything else, I developed the skills to zoom in and zoom out, right? So I zoom out to see the big picture and see the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I zoom in at the details and search for those simple joys, right? Those little moments, those little activities that give you joy and give you energy. And so you constantly zoom in and zoom out to balance those things out. And that skill set transfer into other areas as well. For example, when you zoom out and you recognize the reason why or the strategy that you're applying, you can articulate that to your worker, your teams, your employees, And when you zoom in at the simple joy in each day, you can articulate that, and it help the people around you recognize that life is about a collection of moments. It's not, you can't be happy all the time, you can't be down all of the time. It's just a collection of moments, and if you can articulate those little moments, I think it helps everybody on the team to search for those little joy, little activities, and marry that or couple that or relate it back to the bigger picture, because that gives you the motivation to move forward, right? And continue the next fight, and not consumed by the negativity or the pressure or the stress of that particular situation.
I want to get to that team building aspect here in a second.
Yeah.
But the things that Hung is talking about is really why this podcast exists. So, again, I would just like to remind you, interact with us, comment, and then please like, subscribe, and follow so that we can have more guests like Hung grow the show and help you grow your business. So, Hung, let's talk about how you specifically take a pretty interesting approach, in my opinion, to building others up, building the team, and really, you're a master leadership development guy. And I don't think you get enough credit for it, but you do that with your employees and your direct reports almost naturally. Tell us a little bit about that approach you take.
Yeah, and people don't. What I find interesting is that most people don't like ambiguity, right? And so when you develop the skills of empathy, for example, and you look at the person across of you and you listen carefully, they will tell you what their needs and wants and aspirations. And as a leader, you have to marry that with the task or the project, or the business that you're in, and you create a structure, you create a process. So for the process that I use, we call it PARE, PARE, where we do the preparation work, and then we go out and we allow people to act on it, right? So create those actions, and then you come back as a team. You reflect on it. You don't do the evaluation right away. You reflect on it, right? And then you do the evaluation. So the trick to the whole process is that reflection piece of it, because when people take the time to calm down and reflect on both the intellectual and the emotional sides of things, then it gives them the clarity that they need to put it into the context that they're in, and that give people a sense of autonomy, give them a sense of the willingness to do some kind of mastery of the task that they're working on, instead of a dictation or a command that the boss is demand of this, or the boss is asking you of this. Where we do it is we flip that script and allow the people to allow the team or the employees to do the reflection and arrive at the same conclusion that we want, that we would like them to have. And so that's the process. That's how we do things, because it's not a random luck kind of things. It's a process that gives you the ability to do it over and over again, and learn from those learn from those repetition, that repetition, right? And so I hope I answered your question there, Ryan.
No, and you did. And I think, the thing I want to point out is, in the last 5 or 10 years in entrepreneurship, in marketing, there's been this emphasis on empathy, which I think is great.
Mhm.
But I'm going to tell you, Hung was talking about this 10 years before that. And when that trend started coming around, I went, this is what Hung's been talking about all this time. And that's when the light bulb went off for me, which, as he knows, I'm kind of a slow learner, right? So with that empathy work and pair and some of your approaches to leadership development, Hung, how does that weave into your diversity, equity, and inclusion work that you do now as well?
Well, every time we pick up a project, we look at the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusive. Not because of some racial diversity or gender diversity, but more in terms of, does it make sense, right? So if you're running a business, the numbers that you're looking at most carefully is your return on investment, right? And so if DEI doesn't make sense to you in terms of giving you a greater return on your investment, then business just won't do it, right? And for us, we look at the DEI as a practical approach in how to develop a cultural norm within that organization or within that team to maximize our return on investments, right? And so diversity is not about the skin color. Some of it is, but it's more about the live experiences that people, your team members, bring to the table. It's about the diversity of ideas and thinking, right? Because you need all of those, you need all of that diversity in thinking in order to protect your weaknesses, because all of us have blind spots. And if we don't have that diversity, that blind spots will hit us, smack us in the head when we're not looking. And so that is why that diversity matters, right? And in terms of the equity, it's not about 1-to-1 ratio. It's about, from a Christian background, it's about take what you need and give what you can. And so because you're trying to provide access, you're trying to give people to the table, people of different ideas, different life experiences to the table to have that conversation with you and to share that ideas to help you solve a problem, right? And then the inclusion part is important because you want to acknowledge and listen to all different perspectives, because that give you the ability to gain clarity to solve your problems or to put things in context. And so what we do is to make sure that everybody have a common language to have that conversation, instead of shouting at each other and spent so much emotional energy in creating all of those hard feelings about, all of the nonsense that we see on a day-to-day basis on the news channels. I think people have to pause long enough to reflect on why DEI matters, and to create a common language to have that conversations and move beyond these shouting match. Because if you run any type of organization, big or small, if you can't have your team having a civil conversation, you're not going to go very far. You're not going to solve too many problems. And so that's why DEI matters. And I think because of my experience, we go through this time and time again in a lot of different contexts, that we gain a lot of insights that we can help others find the common language, find a way to incorporate DEI into their daily work so that we become better listener. We can see things better. We can speak, communicate better, so that we can gain efficiency and get the system moving again, and gain a greater return on our investments. And I think that is fundamentally why people should pause, look at their organization, and ask the questions: how do we engage in DEI so that we gain a greater return on our investment? Because if it doesn't make, if that return on investment is not greater, then why do it, right? And so I think that's what I bring to the table because of my experience. And I think people, if they pause and think about it long enough, they can make a business case for themselves of why DEI is important in their organization.
Hung, it's really wise. I mean, I think one of the things I talk about probably the most with my business coaching clients is how can you slow down just a little bit, right? And pay attention to those things.
Yeah.
And as
Yeah.
long as I've known you, that's kind of like the theme that's always come out is as fast as you're growing as your organization, you've got to take your time to slow down so that you can get to know each of your employees on an individual basis. So, Hung, before I let you talk about some of your projects and how the audience here can contact you, again, I would like the audience to drop comments below. We'd love to interact with you that way, myself and Hung as well. So, Hung, here's a little bit of time to talk about some of the things you're working on and how we can contact you.
Yeah. So we are very, very excited to engage in another project that is different, right? So what we do is we build tiny houses, and we insulate those houses with industrial hemp. So we mix our industrial hemp herd with other ingredients, and we insulate these walls with industrial hemp. It gave us greater noise reductions. It gives us better R values per inch. And when we build these houses, we want to use these tiny houses uh, as temporary shelters for kids who are transitioning out of um, the foster care systems. So a lot of kids who turn 18 uh, has to transition out of the foster care system, and they don't have a place to live. They don't have a mechanism to uh, grow, right? And so we want to house these individuals by having them come together in a cohort. We'll bring social service to them. We'll do job training, job placement, um, and they can live in these houses on their own to learn how to take care of their own place and pay their own bills, etc. And it's a way for us to not only highlight the benefits of our product, but also as a way to make sure that we take good care of the least of our brothers and sisters.
Hung, again, thank you so much for being on the podcast this week. Really appreciate your wisdom, knowledge, background, and experience in helping others slow down so they can grow their organizations. Sounds counterintuitive, but you've done it I don't know how many times, and it's always worked. Uh, Again, please like, subscribe, and follow the podcast so we can have more guests like Hung here to grow the show, and then you can get to grow your business based on the nuggets that Hung has dropped here today. Again, my name is Ryan Kauth. You can contact me at ryankauth.coach, and this has been the Fractional Executive Podcast. The Fractional Executive Podcast is produced by Influencer.tv, the awesome team of Adam Marino, Mark Livingston, and Chris Drees.